You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.
1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
Detroit, City of Champions, the podcast. I'm Jamie Flanagan.
Charles Avison.
And we are just been talking about the Tigers, just a whole ton about the Tigers. It was an amazing run in 34. And then we talked about the characters that brought that to life, and then even a more amazing run in 35.
Exactly.
Spoiler alert.
Yep, spoiler alert. 35, they did it, yeah.
But, so at 35, they were able to get the job done because Mickey called it.
Yeah.
So today we were just kind of rounding out. We were going to bat a little cleanup.
Yeah.
Talk about things that we might have missed or skipped, and then some other interesting things that you found in your journey, your 7-year journey of writing Detroit.
Well, the
City
journey
of Champions.
continues. The journey continues, really, because, so I brought in a little visual aid today.
Right.
And,
but before we do that, we just want
to
to remind people to and thank people. There's like people following us and liking us and listening to us, which is like super, super exciting. On Twitter, right?
Yeah.
Somebody followed me. Iffy the Dopester.
I know, I saw that. I actually saw that. That's like the coolest
I
thing.
took a screenshot
You're the
of
biggest Iffy the Dopester fan in the world, man. And then there's like actually an Iffy on Twitter. That's
so somebody
cool.
is using the moniker Iffy the Dopester, and he posts like really cool old.
I was looking through his feed. It's cool.
Tiger stuff. Yeah. And so it's kind of neat to watch that. And
yeah, like I said, I grew up as a reading the newspapers early on, and there was, I swear, there was an Iffy the Dopester that was writing for, it was either the Free Press or the News. And
you sent me.
So for me, I thought that whoever was, I didn't even know what Iffy the Dopester meant or anything.
Yeah.
And I grew up as just like, I was like a fan of that article, of that section. And then it was only really once I got into the 1935 stuff that I realized that like the original Iffy was from the 30s, 20s, and 30s.
Right. So Iffy followed us, and so we just want to thank everybody who's listening and people who are following.
Welcome, Iffy. Super
thanks for following
me.
But like, subscribe, leave a comment because it helps us out. We truly appreciate people taking the time and spending time with us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what if Iffy ever if you listen to the show.
I invited him to join us, and he hasn't responded.
Well, I'm curious to know where like how he got into that name, or because like I've kind of told my story, which is growing up reading the articles. But I'm curious to see how maybe he or she, whoever's writing under Iffy, got that handle from like I did, like reading about it in the 90s, or if they're a history person and got into it just seeing the original.
And there are a couple of like Tigers history followed along and wished us well and said they were listening. So appreciate them.
Welcome.
And so we appreciate everybody who's been
we always I look forward to doing some guests. Like we can talk about just different elements of it, of this and other stuff. So I'm looking forward, forward to the future.
Thanks to them, and thanks to our sponsors.
Yeah.
Gotta love our sponsors. and then, so today we were going to kind of bat a little cleanup and like talk about some things. You had come across, you sent me some pictures, and then you brought in, it's show and tell day.
Yeah, show and tell. Yeah.
It's show and tell on Detroit City of Champions. What did you bring in?
Well, so it's just really a perfect example of sort of the last 10 years. And you say like, oh yeah, I've been on this thing for 7 years, but it continues like every day. I mean, it's like it's even though the books are out, we're here we are doing this show, and every once in a while I get my hands on something cool, and so it's a friend of mine. Her name is Wendy Marsh.
Okay,
I'm very good friends with her and her husband David. And Wendy just asked me one day, she's like, hey, I've got this old, 1934 newspaper from my dad, and his name is Roy Cash. And so I was like, what year was it from? She's like, 1934. I'm like, and what are you trying to do with it? She's like, well, find it a good home. No, like find it a good home. Like I'll take it. That's great. So that's sight unseen. Like I had no idea what the date was.
Yeah,
I had no idea what any of the contents were or anything like this. And so, anyways, it's like, it's magnificent. It's just such a great, my thought was when she was originally giving it to me was that it might be some kind of like a random day.
Sure.
And that it'd be like kind of cool to just say like on this random day, like maybe the Tigers beat the Red Sox or, kind of like, maybe touch on, whatever was, specific to that random day. Cause, we talk about the big events, like maybe there's something kind of obscure or whatever. But, anyways, it's a treasure because the newspaper, the date of the newspaper, I got it right here, September 25th, 1934. And like the day before that you can see on the cover of this, I think you uploaded some pictures.
I did. I just pulled it up.
Right on the very cover, Tigers win flag.
Tigers win
this
flag.
This is the day after the Tigers win their first
Oh
pennant.
My God.
Yeah, this
Look
is the
at
pennant-winning newspaper.
And it's got this great character, the little lion.
Yeah,
Tiger character across with the headline there.
Yeah, the banners. It's got some great illustrations with the Tigers all dancing around. It's F.S. Nixon was just a legendary. Like, his illustrations of the Tiger of Tiger anything back then. Like there he is right here on the next section here.
Yeah,
that's F.S. Nixon. I've got him all through my book for the Tigers. I mean, he is like almost like. Whenever you read about anything, 1934 Tigers, 1935 Tigers, you see F.S. Nixon, like Tiger illustrations all over it. So he's almost like his illustrations, like these quirky Tigers, are really synonymous with the 1934 and 35 Tigers.
Yeah.
So it's a really good example of all that on there. And, the story she said was that she gave me was that, her dad, Roy, was born in 1934. Mm-hmm. So he didn't collect this himself. His dad, Wendy's grandfather, Floyd, got the newspaper.
This is an interesting one from this year. We'll hang on to it for Junior.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one because obviously it shows what that it was an important day.
Is that his birthday, September 25?
I don't know.
Okay,
I should
but it was like from his birth year.
I think Wendy's watching the show. If she's watching, maybe let us know if that's the case.
Throw it up in the comments if you're watching. Wendy.
Yeah, but anyway, I don't know about that, but at the same time, it's significant.
Oh,
and so. So just think about the lineage of this for a second now, James.
Right.
Think about this. So you got a father passing on to his son, who then in turn passes it on to his daughter. This newspaper, what is it? It's over 80. What is it? 84 years old.
Yeah.
It's almost 84 years old to the day. Anyways, it's look about how many years have passed through time for this newspaper, and here it is on this show. It's just such a cool
86 years.
It's 86. Thank you. Yeah, the math is
coming up on 86. Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and it's almost to the month. Yeah. It's the 25th of September. So I was just great. I thought it was cool. I thought it was cool to bring in. There's some really interesting stuff in here, and and it's actually in really good shape. I mean, it's surprising because it was folded, and that's like we talked about it on an early show. Anybody that's got any newspapers that they're trying to preserve, the number one rule: do not fold. If you find them, they're going to be folded because I mean, look at this. Look at the difference in size.
Sure.
I mean, it's a 1 foot by 6 inch panel. That
Unfold
you can store. Exactly. It's a little tougher to, it takes up more space to unfold them.
But they'll last longer.
Because the acid seeks to gravitate towards the folds, and then you can see the brown dark lines that form on the lines. And so it seeks to find the edges, and then once the acid from both directions meet, then that's when the middle gets eaten away. The middle gets eaten away.
Yeah.
And then the newspaper just starts to fall apart. So
I love this.
But this one's in good shape. This one's in good shape, considering that it was folded. The second one has no acid lines on it, which is great.
Yeah.
They're both from the same paper, but they're different components of the sports section.
Oh, okay. So that's great.
That's the cover. He saved the cover, which has got a feature story on. Immediately after they won the pennant. They had a party, and they actually say in here that it was supposed to be sort of an impromptu party.
Yeah.
And it turned into just like a total rager. Like Walter Hagen was there. And Walter actually mentions on here, it's a great little line. Walter Hagen actually says how he came to find out about the pennant.
Yeah.
So he says right here, it was to have been a quiet little affair arranged by Willem Chittenden and a few old timers. But it says before evening, the word got around and a celebration worthy of a championship ensued. Plans were outlined for the big civic celebration for Saturday night, which will be climaxed by a banquet at the Statler Hotel. Washington Boulevard will be the scene of the public celebration when the Tigers will march, headed by masked bands from the Book Cadillac to the Hotel Statler. So they're talking about the real one. This was like the impromptu one. So Harry Bennett and it says Harry Bennett and Harvey Campbell took turns at presiding at the speakers table. They're talking about the party here. This is Walt right here. Walter Hagen told how Mickey Cochran became an American League champion on the golf course yesterday afternoon. He was on the 14th hole and in a sand trap, working as hard as though he were at Navin Field when the flash came that Boston had defeated New York. So that when Boston beat, they had won the previous day, and then when Boston beat New York, because
the season wasn't over, they still had 9 games to play.
Yeah, but Mickey actually says in this paper that it allowed them to basically coast the rest of the year. There's no stress on them. They could use they could rest some of their walking wounded, including himself, which was a little bit beat up at that moment.
Yeah.
Yep. So I just so it's great, and I obviously thank Wendy and Wendy for the gift because it's cool, and it'll
read the gladsome details in today's sports section.
Yeah, the gladsome. It's like good news.
Yeah,
and it's the first pennant the Tigers had won in 25 years, so it was something that it was something that they really. That it was a big deal, of course.
So the paper was 26 pages. It says, on guard, Detroit Free Press, on guard for over a century, 3 cents.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, and things like this surviving, right? So this is 1934. Yeah,
that's what I mean.
This is the midst of the Depression. My house is old. I live in a really old house. It was built in 1831. Pre-Civil War. It's crazy. The cross beams in the basement are logs with bark on them. It's nuts.
Beautiful home, though.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
And there was so they built on a garage and then a dormer above that. And, there's a bathroom there too. And that was built on in 1932. And there's parts in the basement. There's, they try to do some insulation. Some of it is just crumpled up newspaper.
I was gonna predict where you're going with that.
Jammed up in there, and I pulled a couple out, and they were from the 30s.
Yeah,
they were from the 1930s.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Because I've met a lot of people just on the road doing art shows, and they that story what you're saying is often repeated that was a standard. That was a standard method, mode of insulation back then, cheap and easy. Just
so in the Depression, you're not wasting stuff. You just spent 3 whole cents on that paper.
Yeah.
Either you're going to use it to line the bird cage, you're going to use it to wrap some fish, you're going to use it to insulate the house.
Oh, many reasons. Yeah, and then in another example,
decoupage.
Yeah. Well, Hank Greenberg had there was a line. I don't know. I think it's in my book somewhere. But Hank Greenberg talked about how. Even the players were they were way they're not the way they got paid back then is nothing like they get paid now. And Hank Greenberg at this time is he's an unknown. He's barely getting anything. He's just getting paid as a regular guy. And he was actually saying how somebody would set the newspaper down in the lobby of the hotel, and the players would just scramble for it. And it was just that one newspaper would get passed around to half the team because they a newspaper was. It was it's almost like a luxury item, and they're for people that are counting every penny.
Yep.
So I don't doubt the stuffing of the for insulation at the very least.
Yeah. So we're lucky to have this and in such good shape.
Oh, it's
and
beautiful.
Maria, you said was the
Wendy.
Yep.
Wendy.
Wendy, thank you for sharing that with Charles, and now him sharing it with all of us. That is so cool. So what else is notable in this paper?
There's a couple things. I went through it and read it. I've read on the cover. Something that's a little just going through the day's news besides Detroit. It says U.S. to decide on relief sums. Talking about the federal government trying to figure out how much, relief, as in unemployment, they want to put out. And
sure.
Where have we heard that before? It's like today in politics.
That's where it all started.
That's what I'm saying. Here it is, fast forward, 86 years.
Yeah.
And here it is, nothing's really changed.
Same.
Talk about how much money the, U.S. federal wants to give to unemployment or whatever.
We're in the same hole.
Yeah. So there's a lot, just stuff like that I thought was interesting. But the story, the cool thing about this cover story is that they talk about, it's got Cy Perkins in this article. Mm-hmm. And Cy Perkins was Mickey's bench coach. But he was way more than that. Cy Perkins, when Mickey first came up to Philadelphia A's back in 1925 was his very first year. Cy Perkins, Cy Perkins was the starting catcher for the A's at that moment. But he was going on. He'd caught 1,500 games at that point.
Wow!
And so he was like starting to kind of give out, like his legs and knees and stuff. He was starting to get worn out pretty good. And his wife was sick. He was distracted and all this stuff. And so Connie Mack, who was like a totally iconic manager at that time, Connie Mack was looking for basically Cy Perkins' replacement. And so he found it in the form of Mickey Cochran. When Mickey Cochran came up, that's what's so kind of beautiful about this article, is that Mickey was like, he talks about how Mickey was a great hitter, but he was a terrible, he really was not a great defender. And so Cy Perkins really helped to coach him up and get him, caught up to the major league level. And then after this 1925 season, Cy Perkins went to the Yankees. And initially he was going to be a player, but didn't really sort of work out. He stayed with the A's like a backup for a while, whatever. But anyways, it got to the point where fast forward to 1933, and Cy Perkins, that's when he went to the Yankees. That's what the article talks about. He went to the Yankees as a manager to be like a bench coach for Joe McCarthy in New York. And so anyways, so when he gets over there, he's like ready to go. He's ready to do this thing. And then Mickey gets the job in Detroit as the player manager. And Mickey says, "Hey, Cy, come with me to Detroit."
Oh.
And so Cy's like, "Well, I can stay with the Yankees and pick up like a guaranteed World Series check because we're going, the Yankees, we're going to the World Series.
Yeah.
We're going to get this extra bonus money from the World Series."
Mickey's like, "Let me tell you how I'm going to write it."
Exactly. He's like, "You're going to get that bonus, but it's going to be with us."
Oh my God.
What I mean? And Cy's like, I didn't really believe him at that moment, but he's like, I just went with Mickey because I love the guy, and so he went with Mickey to Detroit, and he got his bonus money in his very first year. Yeah, so that's why it's a great little story that you talk about it, in that. So that's some of that, a lot of that stuff, the Cy, partner with Mickey and the A's. I have that in the books, but some of the other little details there, I did not have, which I thought was a great story. So like I say, this is the first few pages of this newspaper are a lot. It's straight from the main section. That was the cover. That was the cover page. But when you get in the sports section is when it starts to get even cooler.
Yeah.
I don't know if you put the picture up or anything, but you can see right at the very beginning in this page right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can read the headlines for those people that can't see it. Mickey predicted flag after opening workout. There were many hours of despair along with triumphs before his prophecy was borne out. This is Charles P. Ward.
Yeah.
So here it is right here in the newspaper talking about Mickey's prophecy, talking about how the Tigers were going to win.
Because it's funny you mentioned that Mickey did make that prediction during the opening workout, but none of these reporters, they all had it in their notes.
Exactly.
And they're like, okay, next. Sure
and
thing,
Mickey. He says
Mickey.
the same thing. He says it wasn't fit for print.
Right.
It wasn't fit for print. We couldn't. And Mickey he actually alludes to the idea that Mickey himself may not have wanted it necessarily for print. Because, especially right off the bat, because maybe it might give other people bulletin board material to use against him.
Mm-hmm.
But because he alludes to that idea in this, that Mickey himself is actually kind of saying, well, we don't necessarily want to, print all that, but he's talking about it in here, like, he was behind the scenes. He was like, he's like, this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
This is happening. So that's interesting that Charles P. Ward, that's a third or fourth example of that.
What do you know about Charles P. Ward? Right? Did he write a lot? Was he on the
big time
beat?
Free press? Yeah, big free press writer. Actually, I have a picture of him in the second book. So I have a whole section on like the media of Detroit in 1930s. I actually have a photo of him in there too.
Mm-hmm.
So he's one of the free press. He's definitely one of the writers. I think Iffy, which is Malcolm Bengay, was actually their sports editor.
Yeah.
And Charles P. Ward was one of their like top writers. I believe that's how it was. I have to kind of double check, but but he was one of their main sports guys. He was like their main Tiger guy.
There were many hours of despair.
Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
the language, the prophecy was born out.
Yeah, but you can see
it's
it
just
right
people
there.
People don't speak like that or write like that. And it's like, why don't people speak like that anymore? Because people don't read.
Yeah.
And they're not writing like that. And it's a vicious circle of
it's just a great concept, especially since they, right there it is, like something we've already been talking about how, Mickey is like just determined to make this happen. And, right off the cover of this, and it's a great little article. I wish I had time to actually read it on air, but, it's a great article because it's just a great summary of the entire 1934 season. It's just a really great. He goes through it. It's a great summary. It's unfortunately. I mean, you can see how long it is. It's like, it's so.
Oh yeah, that's wow. Okay. Well, I mean, but it's a big deal. I mean, when was the last time? This is 1934. They took the pennant.
25 years.
So it's been 25 years.
Too. They said it's been 25 years.
Yeah.
This is 1909. You know?
So they're pretty. The city's pretty darn excited.
They talk about it.
And they're gonna.
Yeah, they talk about it. They say right here. He actually says right here. He talks about one of the moments of excitement. I was just reading this earlier. He actually talks, which is a great little mini synopsis of how
Page
big it was.
2 of the sports section says, "Bring on the series."
He says, "Where's this section? Where's the?" He talks he talks about how insane the fans were when they came home to Detroit.
I love it.
Oh, right. I think I know where it is. Hold on a second. I think it's right here. Let's see. He just talks about how there was like 70,000 fans. It was like the biggest game. This one particular game was like the biggest game.
Don't be afraid to just grab it and move it if you're moving.
Oh, this mic, yeah.
Yeah, just grab it and keep it with you. Keep it with you, man.
Yeah, I gotcha. So let me see. Here, I'm looking at the wrong section.
People don't want to hear me. People want to hear you.
That's not true, Jim.
That is
absolutely. You're the star of the show. I'm
absolutely true.
I so beg to differ. I'm with Charles.
Oh, here it is. I'm looking at the wrong
page. You guys
page
lie.
So here it is. Let's see.
You're actually reading it the story from the newspaper there, Charles?
Yeah, I'm looking for the section where they talk about how big. Right here. I got it. Okay,
perfect.
So, so this is they're talking about. It says. Sunday night, August 12th, the Tigers entrained for New York for the series with the Yankees, which everybody in New York predicted would decide the pennant race for good. They still had a 4.5 game lead over the Yankees when the series got underway with a doubleheader August 14th. When the Bengals arrived in New York, they found the city in an uproar. When they went to the park for the opening game, they found thousands of fans milling outside. When the first game, I guess I misread it. This is actually in New York. It's because he says Sunday night the Tigers entrained for New York. Yep, so they were in New York when this happened. So when the first game got underway, 77,000 fans were in the park, and 30,000 more were outside fighting to get in.
Nice.
They were charging the horses of mounted policemen, knocking down turnstiles and fighting with each other. It was the largest crowd that ever tried to get in to see a baseball game. It says the Tigers ended the battle with the Yankees' prediction ringing in their ears, and then I guess I'll finish this up. It says the Tigers entered the battle with the Yankees' prediction ringing in their ears. They'll crack, said Rupert. Sounded Rupert confident. That was one of the owners of the Yankees.
Yeah.
You can depend upon that. New York received the same punishment for its cockiness that Washington had received a few weeks before. The Tigers, instead of cracking, won the two first. They said this. This is actually his typo. The Tigers, instead of cracking, won the first 2 games of the series and convinced even New York that the Tigers were destined to become the American League champions for the year. So that was like that. So they call that one the little World Series. That's how big that was 77,000. That was in New York. 77,000 fans for this game.
You said it was the big world.
They called it the mini mini World Series. They're the little World Series, something like that. It was like the
just based on the sheer number of people that were
how
there.
big the games were, because they were saying like this is the series that was going to decide whether the Tigers going to win the pennant or not.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So the Little World, I think it was called the Little World Series. I think that's what the nickname was.
Yeah, I got that page up that you were just reading from, and the article there, it says the story of the Tigers' rise to the pennant, and that's what you were reading from. And it goes the whole length of the paper down there.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. It's
2
huge.
columns wide.
Like we almost need a separate show just for me to read that summary.
But I like that page that you were on there, because the headline that goes across the top.
Oh, this is amazing! Yeah,
brings across another. Well, and not that, but the other this page with Gar Wood, right?
Oh yeah, that's another little gem that was in this thing.
Wood. What does it say?
It says
the headline.
Where's it at?
No, that's not the page you were on?
Oh, it's in the front cover. Yeah.
It was on the second page. It was on page 2. Where is it? No.
Huh.
It was on the next page. Yeah, it was on the next page.
I know what you're talking about too.
Should you be handling that with white gloves? I feel like you should be wearing.
Yeah, I know.
You're good. I used to handle newspapers with white gloves, but it's unnecessary.
All right.
It's good. As long as your hands aren't dirty, you're good.
All right.
But anyways, this So
the headline all
I
across
got you.
the top.
Yeah, Wood plans plea to Harmsworth Estate for return of race to river course.
Yeah.
So this is Gar Wood.
Once public to see events, Gar going to London.
Well, yeah, this.
Request.
Well,
so what's going on with that?
This story is really the synopsis of this concept is that there was like an old course that Garwood liked on the Detroit River better than the course that they had run in previous races. And he was like, but it was like officially sanctioned by like these international racing committees that if they were that any further challenges was to follow this particular course. Right. And he was like, no, I like the old one better. So it's not really that big of a deal. But what is kind of a big deal is the image I sent you about Garwood, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, there was another, you highlighted the Garwood.
Yeah, I highlight a little square on it, the little red square. I thought that was particularly interesting, which is that it's just a little factual blurb,
right?
But it talks about it says it's called Sportlight, and then it's just like little facts here and there. And so fact number 12, it says the speedboat record for motorboats was set at Algonac, Michigan, on September 20th, 1932, when Garfield A. Wood of Detroit sent his Miss America 10 over a measured mile and back, 124.86 miles an hour. So talking about the world record for speed on water, and that still held in obviously in 1934, but in 1935 as well, that was still the record.
So that came from that page, and then at the top of that page, it's a big picture.
Oh yeah, this is it.
It's a team photo, thing. Champions.
Yeah. This is such a great picture. I'd never.
That
seen
looks so
this.
contemporary.
I'd never seen this particular thing in the. This photo is iconic because this is the Tigers. This is the Tigers 1934 champions like team photo.
Right.
But I've seen the photo in many cases, but I've never seen it really incorporated into the newspaper in person like this. I mean, I've seen it like doing microfilm stuff, but never when it's this is how big it is. You can see how massive. I mean, this is like
I love the big Hudson's ad in there.
Yeah, this
too.
is like I don't even know how big this is, but it's like a foot tall. The picture itself is like a foot tall by like I don't even know 18 inches wide or
it's the whole fold. It's the entire above the fold.
Yep, and it says champions in the background. It's cool because the photo that you see a lot of times is this. I mean, this is the photo you see, but a lot of times in every case you see this photo. It's got like It's they took this photo. It was like there's like a wall backdrop, like a big wall, and they're sitting on bleachers. But this is the first one that you see where they actually have that wall removed, and the backdrop is just the newspaper. It's like a black background.
I mean, like I said,
so it's real
those
cool.
graphics that does not look like 1934. Oh, it looks way more contemporary than that.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Their newspapers, the newspapers back then were sensational. Yeah. They were incredibly cool. One of the things that we don't have today. I
love that font.
Yeah, one of the things we don't have today, which is what they had, which was so cool, was they called the Rotogravure supplements on every Sunday.
Oh.
So every Sunday they would include a special section called this Rotogravure. If somebody wants, if you want to see an example of what they are, I collected these things for my books, so I use Rotogravures extensively in my books. But if you want to just see it, if you're listening right now and you want to see what I'm talking about, just look on eBay, and it's spelled R-O-T, so Rotogravure, so R-O-T-A-G-R-A-V as in Victor, U-R-E. So okay. Rotograv, you could pronounce it Rotogravure, like that. But anyways, if you look that up, if you search for that term, you will see some of the coolest images you have ever seen, especially if you're like a history person, like you love like nostalgia and stuff. The stuff that you find on YouTube, because every newspaper did it back then. The major newspapers all put out these Rotogravure supplements on Sundays, and they are just the coolest papers. They use this really high grade. It was like they printed on copper plates, and they rolled it through these machines. So like the precision of the photos is staggering. I mean, you just can't imagine how, like when you see them in person, these Rotogravures. I started my own collection of them. I have one of the greatest like Rotogravure sport, Detroit sports collections, but I don't have the number one. There's a guy that I met along the way that actually has an incredible collection. I use his stuff for the first book, but anyways, the rotography. So they had this Sunday supplement, and it talked about local stuff, it talked about national stuff, it talked about international stuff. So they had all these photos. So like you would, photos from like Ireland. They'd say like this is County Cork in Ireland or whatever, and they were just beautiful, beautiful photos on every Sunday. And they did it for like from like the early 1900s all the way through like the 40s.
Wow.
And then they just stopped doing it. But they were like so that was kind of like your little bonus on Sundays was you would get this. I mean, it was like just these beautiful sections in the paper, and you can't help but marvel now, or even I'm sure then, because they were highly collectible. You find them, they pop up in a lot of scrapbooks when you see that stuff. So yeah, newspapers back then were the primary vehicle of conveying information. Radios were big, but newspapers were it. I mean, this is how you really got your hands on wall to wall information. So,
What else in this? In these 26 pages, have you come across that you found interesting?
Well, one of the things that I didn't find is actually really interesting is that just the day before this, which was, let me make sure I got this date right. I was like,
September 25. I thought I saw
it was September. Well, the date of the newspaper is the 25th.
Yep.
But the 23rd of 1930 to September 23rd of 1934 was the Lions' first game. First game.
Oh.
So 2 days before this was the Detroit Lions' first game, and they beat the New York Giants 9-0.
Wow.
And so where is it?
Is there any mention of the Lions?
It's 2 days after. That's why I was like, at first I thought it was the 24th, and I was like, man, this is really missing. But it was actually, this is 2 days later, and of course this is a big day for the Tigers. But still, they could have found another little.
There's not a box score.
They
nothing,
talk about a
whole sports
little,
section.
Yeah, there's that like one little. They talk about a player that got injured during the game, but that's really about
for
it.
the Lions.
No, for the New York Giants.
Oh, okay.
And so, but otherwise, it's like they couldn't have found one little glint, like one little thing. But it kind of ties into what we're going to talk about with the Lions. How the Lions were really, in the Tigers' shadow. The Lions came to the city hoping to like associate with the Tigers. Yeah. And man, they found the opposite initially happen.
Oh.
They were in the Tigers' shadow big time. Big time. It's like their only way that they could even be remotely relevant was for them to win. And they had to win big. And so that's like the Lions found themselves in a situation where they're like, we don't not only have to just win to stay relevant, like we have to win a championship to stay even then they barely stayed relevant, even winning a championship. So that's going to be a big topic that we talk about for the Lions.
Okay.
But that's like found in this concept is that they're not even, first game for an NFL team in the city, and it's like the next day, I'm sure there was the previous day, if we had that paper, they'd be talking about it. But in this one, they're like, yeah, that was 2 days ago. That was a while.
But it was their first game. Yeah. It was their first game.
Yeah, it happened just right before this paper. So that's one thing. That was like one of the first things I was really looking for was to see if I could find some Lions stuff in here. But another great thing here is this photo, which is Cherry Street.
Right.
And you can see the construction. There's a picture. This is a beautiful photo. I hadn't seen this one before.
Bring on the World Series.
Yeah, they are in this. It says, yep, now bring on the World Series is the header for that photo. And what it is workmen are going to town on the temporary bleachers out in left field.
Oh.
Yep. They're building the bleachers for housing the 15,000 fans that are going to be at the World Series. So they're starting construction on it in this photo. Yep. It's cool. You got a little kid riding a bike down the street. He's like kind of going, oh, what's going on? But you see the truck that's carrying the lumber for this. Like this is almost should be like the header for the video or whatever. Like that George Moriarty, just so people can kind of see it. Because it's just so cool. He's got the lumber truck sitting there. Yeah. With all the planks ready to go, and they're about to go to town. You can see the wall for the onto the right of the photo. It's got the wall, the left field wall that they're about to build it over.
Yeah. Yep. And then the headline of the story underneath it is
Babe Ruth.
Yeah.
Yep. No one seems to care as Bambino bows out. Yep. This is the Babe Ruth's last season in New York for the Yankees. Yep. And
did the Tigers just beat the Yankees?
No, in this case, the Yankees had just been beaten by the Red Sox.
Oh, the Red Sox.
That's what secured the Tigers' pennant. But this article is about Babe Ruth and how his feelings are hurt because his old idol feels hurt as only 1,500 turn out for his last game.
Oh.
So it's in New York. It says let's read the little quick header. The last official game played by George Herman Ruth, the most famous baseball player the world has ever known as a regular member of the New York Yankees, was handsomely celebrated today by a dismal scattering of some 1,500 or fewer spectators.
Ooh.
The Yankee Stadium was a yawning cavern. The Babes sat in the dugout before the game, glum and depressed. His final appearance had been extensively advertised. All the papers featured it. Yep. Somehow we thought it would be an outpouring of the faithful to say, I can't even pronounce it, off Whiterson. That is Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
I've never seen it written out like that. Okay. To say Auf Wiedersehen if not goodbye in baseball's greatest figure, but there wasn't. I hadn't thought it possible for the crowds to forget quite so quickly. I know that the Babe was deeply hurt. He was gnawed off at a corner of an oblong plug of tobacco, his fingers as usual, ink staining from autographing baseballs. He said in his rare and juicy vocabulary that there was no fun in playing before such a small crowd, but that he would start the game.
Wow.
So, so in contrast to what they were saying about that little World Series, where there were 77,000 fans, by this point the Yankees were eliminated and nobody's there.
Oh, man,
yeah.
oh man!
So
how quickly they forget.
Yankees fans, they have a pretty high expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when they're winning World Series like every year back then. They're eliminated from the World Series this year. Like, yeah, I'm good. I'm not going.
Football's kicking off. Let's go.
So, but that's just sad though, because it's Babe Ruth's last game as a Yankee. I'd never known that either.
Well, that's funny because we were looking at the movie Play Ball, and they just showed how he would get mobbed, even in away games.
Well, even in this, it says his fingers were ink stained from signing baseballs, like just as usual. Like it was like a permanent, like a tattoo of ink on his fingers because he's as usual signing baseballs.
And how juicy was his English, his language though?
I think it was pretty juicy. I don't think it was. That they could really. Printed it the exact stuff that he said.
Probably not.
I mean, I think it's those movies the Babe that I've envisioned as seen in the movies where with like John Goodman,
right.
Where I'm sure it wasn't the most printable stuff. And I've actually read firsthand accounts of people that remembered Babe, and they were like, he was like an idol, but at the same time, like if you actually knew him, like day to day, like you wouldn't think he was like really an idol. Like he was just dirty, like not dirty, like as far as like being covered with dirt, but but he was like as foul mouthed as you could be, and like
just enjoy how descriptive that article is. The writing in itself is so descriptive. Yeah. It's amazing.
Well, that's one of the things I really fell in love with all this whole project early on was like the way that they wrote was just, I mean, the writing back then was just cool. It was so cool. My favorite was the Detroit Times because they would actually have like a banter going back and forth between the writers.
Okay.
Like they would actually like they would make fun of each other. They would like send like little messages to each other, kind of like making fun of each other or praising the other guy or something. Iffy's article is Iffy has an article on this, which is on here too. Iffy, the notes are right on the cover.
Yeah.
And so his article is very similar to that too, with that style of prose where it's like flowery, like, some of this, they have fun with their writing, and these are the kind of people that just really pound out articles like all day, every day. They might even write out a few pseudonyms just to fill columns.
Well, because this at the top, and when we looked at the beginning, it was like final edition,
Yeah.
And there were a couple of editions throughout the day.
Sure.
It wasn't just the daily paper.
Yeah.
There were a couple of editions throughout the day.
Well, that's right.
And so these reporters, they were grinding.
Well, the
it
newspapers
out.
would say like extra, like they'd have that extra edition because there was something breaking news, and maybe you read the paper in the morning, and then the kids like extra, something happened, something big just happened. Read all about it, and then that's
crazy
why,
going down.
The people are like, oh, what? I got to read that. They sell an extra paper that day and make extra money. So it's totally different times. It was just kind of a cool thing that. Once you put the paper down for the day, it was all about, talking with each other.
That's interesting, though, that the headline on that one, on Iffy's article there, it's like unbeatable team. Iffy places his accolades on all-time All-American Ball Club. It's like, so Iffy's kind of a player in the game.
Well, no, he
puts his accolades on the thing.
He's deciding his all-time team based on what he's kind of an older guy at this point. He's been writing articles on baseball since the early 1900s.
Yeah,
and so he puts his list together of like if he was to build like the greatest team ever, this was the team that he would, not the Tigers, but he gathers players from all through baseball history.
But they invoke the writer's name in the headline.
Yeah,
and not just the byline. It's interesting that they invoke.
Oh,
they
yeah.
use
If
the
he
writer.
plays this, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's what you're saying. Yeah,
that they use the writer's name in the headline. That it's like,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he was like a main, he was one of the big names in Detroit. He was, I believe, again, I think he was the editor at this time. But it's interesting to see actually what his all-time team is, which is at first, I can read it off. At first base, he has Hal Chase. Mm-hmm. At second base, he has Charlie Gehringer.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And then shortstop, Honus Wagner. Third base, Jimmy Collins. Right field, Ty Cobb. Center field, Tris Speaker. Left field, Babe Ruth. Catcher, Mickey Cochran. Pitchers, Christy Mathewson, Bill Donovan, who was a Detroit Tiger early on in early 1900s, and Rube Waddell, Walter Johnson, and Grover Alexander, and he's got Lefty Grove on there too.
He's got him as a DH in there. What's he got?
He's got a stack. Those are all pitchers. I just like one last little guy. Missed out on. But it's interesting to see that he's got 1, 2, 3, 4 Tigers in his all-time team.
Right.
Bill Donovan, Ty Cobb, Charlie Gehringer, and what was that for? Oh, and Mickey Cochran, yeah.
Right.
But it's cool. It's a great little article that he writes in there too. And the cool thing is that he really goes into detail about Hal Chase, who was a player from the early 1900s, and he talks about him like he says like back in the early 1900s, first basemen used to basically just be guys that would stand on first and catch the ball. That's all they would do. But Hal Chase was such a great defender that he would actually played like almost like second base and allowed the second baseman to slide over further, which allowed the shortstop to slide over further. And then it, allowed far more coverage of the infield, which is like actually what ended up becoming the standard around which baseball is still played. But back in the early days, the second baseman was played way closer to first base. Everybody was shifted far more, there was way bigger holes in the infield. And so he was actually saying, he was like, that's one of the reasons why Hal Chase is my favorite first baseman ever, because he like defensively was so good that he just completely changed the game.
He set that tone.
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting, but he talks about Charlie Gehringer, how great he was. Of course, Ty Cobb, he just goes, well, I don't even need to talk about Cobb. He's so great.
Yeah.
But the surprising thing too was about the pitchers, because he actually lists, of all the pitchers he just mentioned, he talks about Rube Waddell as he's like, these guys are all great, but Rube, in his opinion, was like was the best of all the guys he saw. And I'm not going to go too deep into it, but Rube Waddell, I'm sure there's people have heard his name, but maybe you haven't, or somebody out there that has not. Rube Waddell was like this incredibly eccentric type pitcher.
Okay.
Like he was like at least the stereotype of him was.
Yeah.
Like he would like be pitching in like a big game and he would see a puppy or something and he would go, "Oh my God, a puppy." Like he would like he had this really like eccentric thing. Like teams would do weird little stuff like that to throw him off of his game.
That sounds like somebody I know really well, and he's sitting right across the way from me.
Oh my God,
I'm super.
Well, you guys got Animal
man.
Talk. Maybe that's the
I'm Jingle Keys.
Yeah, maybe that's a story for Animal Talk or you guys' other show. But anyways, that's the kind of stuff but he talks about, he's like, Rube Waddell was like so good. Like he had this stunt that he would pull in the 9th inning where he would like walk the bases loaded, like literally intentionally walk the bases loaded, and then tell his infielders to go out in the outfield. And then he would strike the next 3 guys out and end the game. Like he would do it just to like.
What team did
he played for a couple. He played early on. I believe he played for Cleveland super early on, but he was on the A's. He had I think he mentions the teams right here on his.
All right. No, that's cool.
But but I know he played for the A's.
That's funny.
He played for several different teams because he was like he was a super heavy drinker. As great as he was on the field, like he was also a major handful. Like he was really difficult. Like you had to do all this.
Not like Moriarty going after 4 guys at once.
Yeah, so but he was such a eccentric that he was very difficult, to work with. But like whenever you were able to get him out on the field, like he was just dominant. Like that was his thing. I wish you probably have it right there. But yeah, sure. I know I'm pretty sure he played for Cleveland. I know he played for
what
the
else?
A's.
What else have we not given enough attention to while we're talking about the Tigers here? Who else? What else did we glaze over?
Well, there's one story
with
George Moriarty that we didn't get to last episode, and I really wanted to get to it.
All right.
It shows us because we talked about his brawling. We talked about the movie thing. We talked about all this different stuff. And I think, we painted this picture of a guy who was, a talented, artist, especially as filmmaker, talented player. I mean, his first year in the major leagues, he had 12. He stole home 12 times.
Yeah.
And I don't think we covered this in last show, but the guy actually wrote a poem about him. About like it was this iconic poem called "Don't Die on Third," which was about how they used George Moriarty stealing home
right.
as a metaphor for life. Like,
okay,
like you can just sit at third base and hope somebody else is going to drive you in, or you can like take the initiative and like.
Because he was known for stealing home.
He was known for stealing home. And so that's one of the things
Who
we didn't
steals
talk
home?
about. I know. It's rare. These days you see a guy do it every once in a while, but Moriarty did it 12 times in 1 year, which is in his first season. So.
You typically see that on a squeeze play in these days, right?
Yeah, every once in a while you see somebody snag a steal home, and it's like one of the most thrilling plays in baseball because the great thing is the pitcher's like standing there, and the guy usually the guy he's the guy in third sees something, the pitcher's totally ignoring him or something, and then the guy in third is just every pitch the guy's like inching a little closer and a little closer, and then he just sees this moment where the pitcher is just not noticing him. Right. And then the great thing is the pitcher turns to throw home, you know what I mean? Just to do something he always does, and he can't even get him at home. It's just such
love it.
Stealing home is still like one of the most exciting plays in baseball.
Sure.
And there's usually a cloud of dust. The ball just gets there. The guy dives, and it's a great thing. But Moriarty did it 12 times. It was a different era where stealing home was actually a. Cobb stole home a bunch of times too.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a tremendous base stealer. But stealing home was like literally part of the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like part of the game. Like, is that guy going to steal home? like pitchers really had to be. It was much like they call it small ball. Baseball back then was wasn't so much based on the home run like it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a lot of that stealing home and this kind of stuff. But anyways, Moriarty. It was like they actually this guy wrote like a poem, like a story about Moriarty, and then they equated it to like life. Like plenty of people get to third base, but plenty of people sit there and wait for somebody else to get that last hit, to drive him in, or to get them to that final leg of achievement in their life. He's like, but only the very few, take the initiative themselves and like they take home, like they actually go for home themselves, like so it was like a total metaphor. So anyways, they so that was big at the time, like so it was huge. I mean, when the guy that originally did it, I think his name was William Cameron that originally wrote it, and you can read it if you look up "Don't Die on Third." It's on the internet. It's all on the internet. It's a great little story. But the idea is that it was a metaphor. They were back using baseball as a metaphor for life. That don't die on third. Take home. Like that was the idea. So anyways, so we've talked about this with Moriarty, where there was Moriarty the player, there was Moriarty the umpire. There was Moriarty the brawler, the poet, the movie maker. But I wanted to read a little quote. It's very short.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I could just describe it, but it's got more power when you read it from somebody that actually was there and wrote it. And there's actually two. This is I guess you could say a Moriarty incident, but not as dramatic as fighting for Chicago White Sox in a play, or not as not as crazy as some of his other stuff, his other antics. So anyway, this is just give you a frame, sort of a frame of reference. This is Game 3 of the 1935 World Series. George Moriarty threw out 3 Cubs managers, and of course his long track record with Detroit and the Tigers and all this has made him a total target for criticism of having thrown out 3 Cubs managers in the same game. I mean, that's like unheard of.
Yeah.
And so anyways, so here it is. So this is at the World Series. Mm-hmm. Okay. And keep in mind this involves Frank Navin. Mm-hmm. All right. And Frank Navin, as we recall from a previous show, Frank Navin is like the ultimate, they call him the poker face.
Right.
Because he never has any emotion. He's just like, there's a joke article that I put in the second book in Frank Navin's section, which is they call it a magic eye, where they show 6 different moments of a game with Frank Navin's expressions. They're like, this is the most pivotal moment of the second inning. And Frank Navin is just sitting there
Same stoic
face. Yeah. So it's the same stoic face in every picture going, this is the most critical, Tigers have just scored 5 runs. The Tigers are up. They're about to win the game, and they go, and he's like and then there's yeah, exactly. It's just Navin stone face. It was such a joke that he was like, like a bookkeeper.
Yeah.
That's what they nicknamed the poker face. So anyways, so it's going to come as a shock to you, to anybody that knows this idea, to hear the story of Frank Navin. And keep in mind, there was also the incident with George Moriarty earlier when he got in that fight with the Red Sox on Sunday Baseball. And Navin actually showed a little enthusiasm then too.
Right.
Because he was standing in the dugout pleading for order in the middle of this Sunday baseball game. So that moment of excitement is really the only other known, frenzy of Frank Navin, with the exception of the one that I'm about to read to you now. So this is in the 1935 World Series. And so this comes out of by Fred Lieb in his history book on the Detroit Tigers. And so a Cub partisan seated in a box near Frank Navin yelled, "Moriarty, you're a thief." Navin arose in his own box and called back, "George Moriarty is not a thief, and don't you ever say that again. There isn't a more honest man in the world." So Fred Lieb's book on the Detroit Tigers is an incredible book. And of all the stories that he could write about, this is not like an encyclopedia. His book is not that long. His 1935 Tiger section is maybe, 15 or 20 pages long.
Okay.
And so of all the moments that he could chronicle for that, the fact that he includes a passage about that happening says volumes about, about Moriarty and Navin and all this. But there's one more article, and this is a very, sort of verifies the incident, which is this is by Bob Murphy in the Detroit Times, and this happened. This is November 14th, 1935. And so then here it is. This is actually Moriarty talking. He says, "And never," continued Moriarty, "can I forget what he," and he's talking about Frank Navin, did during the past World Series. I heard about it from other people. Some fan in the Cub ballparks it happened in Wrigley Field. Some fan in the Cub ballpark stood and yelled, 'Thief!' When I called one on the Cubs that he didn't like," meaning he called a strike or a ball that they didn't like. "So I learned that Mr. Navin arose from his seat and told the fan he couldn't say that about me. He told me that he had known me since I was a kid of 20, that I wasn't a thief. Mr. Navin told me later that fellow came to him and apologized." So you see what I'm saying? So this is like verified from 2 different perspectives.
Right.
Like Fred Lieb years later is writing about this. I think his book, the Tiger book, came out in the 40s. And then here, this is actually at that time, 1935, of Moriarty himself talking to Bob Murphy. And I think this is shortly after the passing of Frank Navin. That's why that article was extracted. Why that was mentioned in the newspaper.
I love it.
But he's like, Frank Navin's like, don't of all the million hecklers, at Wrigley Field, and the guy says, "Moriarty, you're a thief," and Navin's like, "Hold on a second, buddy." Like 8 million things, and of that one thing, like you say, we just set the stage perfectly with Frank Navin here, where Navin is like the most stoic person. You can't rattle him. He doesn't get excited. He doesn't have any negativity or anything until you get up to the point until you say something about George Moriarty. You see what I'm saying? Like that's how esteemed he was.
He wasn't a Tiger player. He was the umpire in the game. He was He's a former player and a former manager. Wow. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So it kind of, that's why I love that concept or that story, because it really shows the level of respect, that especially between Navin and Moriarty, was so high that Navin is like the ultimate poker face, is going to call out a fan.
Right.
Say, don't you ever, that's in a baseball game. Come on, everybody's talking bad about an umpire, going, "Hey, you could kill that guy, you stink, whatever." Heckling an umpire is almost as part of the game from the fan perspective. And the fact that Navin would like call out a fan, going, "Don't you dare say that about the umpire! How dare you, sir? He's a great, he's maybe a lot of things, but he's not a thief." Like that. It's just, to me, that's just like it just speaks absolute volumes.
Right.
About about the level of respect, at least between Navin and Moriarty, which their time kind of of course dated dated back to the earlier days with where he told after that Red Sox fight, he said don't ever let him do that to you again, George. He said, "I won't, Mr. David." He says, "No, don't ever let him spit in your eye like that again." Like it wasn't. So anyways, that's another story I definitely had to get in on there.
So we will again. There's no way we'll be done with the Tigers ever. We'll come back to them, and we'll talk more about them. We got more teams and more champions to talk about because there were 33 different championships in 1935.
For a long time, man.
It is. I'm excited about it. I'm in a groove, man.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm digging it, and people are digging it too. Nico, Carolyn, Tim, and Gareth. They were all checking in today and saying,
Gareth,
"Hey,
that's my boy Giggs." Yeah,
so thanks
he's in England, so we got a viewer in England. If that says Gareth is on there, that's Giggs. Yep.
So Giggs, thanks for being with us. Everybody, thanks for tuning in Detroit City of Champions, the podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe wherever finer podcasts are sold, which is kind of a misnomer because it's absolutely free to subscribe.
For sure. At least right now it is. One of these days we're going to get big time.
Put it behind a paywall.
It's going to be big time. Yeah, that's going to be like subscription only. But we might do something where if you're an original viewer, original listener,
that's it.
Like, there's going to be deals.
Sure.
We'll cut you a deal.
Oh, yeah.
You get like 10% off when we start charging. So, like some say, like, be a viewer now. It'll pay off in the long run.
Like,
the
website
guaranteed.
is?
DetroitCityOfChampions.com.
Easy enough.
Yeah, it's easy as you get.
And follow us on Facebook, and the videos are on YouTube. And as I had a bunch of Moriarty pictures up too while we were doing that.
Cool. And you got some of the newspaper stuff in
had
there?
all the newspaper stuff while we were rolling. So you can check that out. If you're listening to the audio podcast, it's kind of worth a stroll over to check out the YouTube videos because we had some photos into those as well. So thanks for listening. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. Appreciate it. Charles, appreciate you and
Jamie,
the partnership.
Matt's back
Holy
there.
crap. Yeah,
he's back there.
Matt's
the brains of the entire
Oh,
operation.
no, God, no, man. I didn't spend 8 years of my life putting all this together. You are the brains. I'm just back here pushing buttons and enjoying the hell out of it.
But you're the man back there behind the scenes, man.
Don't let Jamie fool you.
No, you guys are both. I really love you guys. It's a great thing, and
we appreciate you for sure.
It's just cool because I kind of just stroll in, and you guys are tweaking all the stuff. Like, okay, we're ready. Let's get it going.
Showtime.
Yeah, so I just kind of come in. I got my newspaper.
That's it.
Hey, I got this newspaper, guys. Let's talk about this today. But it's fun. It's cool. I like it.
Appreciate you.
We're going to do it all again next week. Detroit City of Champions, the podcast.